to people who are afraid, or who represent people who are afraid. We are all afraid. Okay. That's what I say. But we are we're in a place where I don't know. I certainly am not. I have not been here before. And I'll tell you, I'm oftentimes very anxious myself about using my voice. Because retaliation is real. And that's not right. But that's what she'd ask you to do. And so I'm going to use my voice to the best of my ability, and sometimes it will be viewed in a way that, well, that's pretty confrontational. And other times he's going to be using my mother's charm that I learned as a young girl, and in direct communication with those that I made relationships with, and am able to affect some change that way. And I got to figure out how I can do my best to help the many who are so anxious and are so afraid.
That was Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski, and it's a pretty shocking statement to hear the words, "We are all afraid," from a member of Trump's own party. So let's dig into this a bit, because there are two ways to think about this. The first is that it is easy, trust me, very, very easy to want to disparage this person for being part of the very machine that has so emboldened Trump for all of these years. And that's true. And it makes me angry, and I'm sure it makes you angry too. And you can't be blamed for looking at all of these people, whether their contributions to Trumpism have been big or small, and wanting to simply say, fuck you. You are part of the problem. You are why we are here. I don't have sympathy for someone who is a willful accomplice in any way, allowing for the rise of Trumpism. The reality is that Murkowski is a Republican. When she won as a Republican, her victory meant that a Republican majority leader would be that much closer to running the Senate, which means that Trump would be able to advance his agenda that much more easily. In other words, there is no world in which the culpability of every single Republican elected official isn't apparent. So look, I get the tendency to want to say, fuck you, I told you so. Trust me, I am fueled by contempt. I remember the names of people who were mean to me in middle school, and I wish I was kidding. But here's the other side of the coin. The goal of politics is coalition building. Our only job is to figure out how to win the next election. Not to gloat or beat our chest that you were right or I was right. It is about gaining power moving forward so you can enact your agenda and help the most people. And sometimes that requires putting our egos aside and saying the words, quite simply, you're welcome. It's hard, I get it, but what is more important? Saying, I told you so, or saying, come be a part of our coalition and help us win moving forward? I tend to think it should be the latter. And look, this is not to say that Lisa Murkowski is going to switch parties and become a Democrat. It's also not to say that she won't. But she's clearly much more willing to acknowledge objective reality than her colleagues. That is worth something in an age of abject cowardice and fealty. Ronna McDaniel Romney literally changed her last name in her blind obedience to Donald Trump, which is to say, this is not a normal political party. This is a cult of worshipers bowing at the altar of their God King. And so if Murkowski is capable and willing of bucking that trend, we should encourage it instead of shaming her. I should also note, at the risk of sounding like I'm doing Murkowski apologia, that she has publicly defied Donald Trump before. She has voted to convict him in the Senate trial. She voted against Pete Hegseth. She denounced his move to pardon January 6th insurrectionists. And yes, for every one thing that she denounced, there are 10 more things that she didn't. But again, our goal right now has to be growing the coalition. Everyone, left, right, or center, is welcome in our tent. The Bernie bros to the Cheney stands and everybody in between. In fact, we are not a viable political party unless we grow our tent, because we lost the popular vote in 2024. we have no choice but to grow our tent. If that means we make space for whatever people possible in whatever fashion possible for somebody like Lisa Murkowski, then we do it. Because the only way to gain power is by a policy of addition, not subtraction. And by the way, this is a subject that I spoke about with Senator Brian Schatz, this idea of bringing people into our coalition despite our past differences. What do you make of the fact that you've got all these Republicans who were so quick to back Donald Trump during the campaign or over the last few years? People like Meghan McCain, for example, who came out and tweeted, "Inject every policy into my veins," who are now coming out, and Meghan McCain is one of them, Dave Portnoy is another one, now coming out and basically, recognizing that they themselves are being impacted, and so suddenly have an impetus to speak out.
My view is welcome. And
Yeah.
I mean that. I mean that with zero sarcasm, with zero resentment. People, a good buddy of mine used to say, people vote for you for their reasons, not yours.
Yeah.
The purpose of politics is not to winnow down your political coalition to a purer and purer group, but rather politics is addition, not subtraction. Dave Portnoy is a big deal. I still follow him exclusively for the pizza reviews
Yeah.
and the Boston Celtics takes.
I'm in the same boat. I watch the pizza reviews and so I get it. I understand if I'm watching him, even with all the biases I have on the political side, imagine what people who don't give a shit about politics are thinking.
Yeah, and so my view is there's a little bit of a tendency in the Democratic coalition and the Progressive coalition to go now you're here, and why did you say this earlier? Who cares?
Yeah.
We have to not be such a scolding coalition. We have to basically say, hey, they fucked with your money and you're welcome, right? Come on in, and either you were mistaken, but also, by the way, the other thing we've seen from polling, and this is not the recent polling, is people start to misremember who they voted for because it's been a minute, and they may not remember that they voted for Donald Trump because they were torn in that moment. And so my view is we need to welcome as many of those types into our coalition as possible. There were a bunch of people who tolerated the, kind of authoritarian tendencies and tolerated the kind of overly conservative social views because they thought he was going to be good for the money, right? Now he's not good for the money. And there are other people who tolerated this kind of overly friendly with Wall Street stuff because they thought he was going to be, sort of cruel to the people that they hated. Those people I don't think we're ever going to get back. And but I do think the reason we lost, and we lost decisively on one level, but still by 1.5%. So the reason we lost is some tiny little percentage of people said, I don't like prices. I don't like Biden because he's old. I don't like what I've been paying. And when I remember the Trump administration from the first time, I remember money in my pocket, right? And maybe they're misremembering, or maybe they're remembering correctly because during COVID, we did have a bunch of cash payments out to people. So there were a bunch of people who were very low income, low asset, levels, but they had $7,000 in the bank. They were out of credit card debt, if only for 6 or 12 months. And they wanted to go back to that time. So once you start messing with people's money, I think we should not assume that there are any permanent realignments, and those alignments only go against us, right? There was a bit of a realignment in the last election. It's a very real thing. But now we need to think about the veterans that have been laid off, the people who depend on Social Security, the parks workers, the FAA folks, the current and former military people, civilian and military, and then anybody of the 60% of the Americans who've got money in the stock market, either individual stocks or mutual funds, 401ks, 403bs. Everybody's welcome in our coalition. If you hate all this shit, you're part of the team.
So please, keep in mind as we move forward that we are not here to impose purity tests. This is not marriage. It is not church. We're not looking for spiritual leaders or life partners. We're not looking for perfection. This is politics. The job from today onward is adding as many people to our coalition as possible, as imperfect or, hell, downright deplorable as we may perceive them to be. I would rather be part of a coalition that I agree with 75% of the time that has power than a coalition that I agree with 100% of the time that has no power. And I presume the rest of you agree. And so my posture here for anybody willing to buck Trump is quite simply welcome. Before you go, if you enjoyed this content and you want to see more and support independent media, please subscribe to this channel. The subscribe button will be right here on the screen. But second, the reality is that we are now in a political environment where this administration can lean on any of the social media platforms to suppress certain voices if they don't like critical coverage. That means my longevity here is in the hands of a few tech billionaires who are already making it clear that they are willing to cater to this administration. To that end, signing up for my newsletter is a way for me to reach you directly if that ever becomes necessary. I'll put the link right here on the screen as well, so please sign up. It's free, but there's also an option to do a paid subscription if you'd like to support me and my team. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching.